this the 3 T's. And each of these T's are extremely important for getting people to click on your videos. And we talk in great detail about each of these things in the Pro YouTuber course, which I'll link down below in the description, but let's briefly go over each of these things now. So of all 3 of the T's, I believe that the topic is the most important element, because I've seen videos that have incredible titles and thumbnails, but the topic of the video is too obscure, and so no one actually clicks on the video. On the contrary, I've seen videos that have horrific titles and thumbnails, but the topic is something that piques people's interest, and so the video ends up getting a ton of views. And so by far, the topic is the most important element of the 3 T's. But you still obviously want to have good titles and thumbnails because you want to try and capture as many clicks as possible. And so let's talk about this, and we'll start first with titles. What makes a good title? Well, first, your title needs to actually be accurate and descriptive. In other words, the title of your video should accurately reflect what your video's content is actually about. At the same time though, you want to make sure that your titles are both attention-grabbing and intriguing. For example, let's play a game here, okay? Is somebody more likely to click on this title, Investing Basics 101 with Graphs and Charts, or this title, Investing for Beginners, How to Retire a Millionaire? Now, both of these titles are about the same exact topic, but this video here, How to Retire a Millionaire, will get significantly more views because it has a much more intriguing title. Some other important tips when it comes to your titles is you want to try and include keywords in your titles whenever possible. This will help your video to rank a lot higher in the search results page, which of course will lead to more views. And again, we talk about all of these things in great detail in the Pro YouTuber course. But you also want your titles to be clear and concise, and you want to avoid using jargon or technical terms that your audience may not understand. For example, instead of titling your video, How to Use a Leavening Agent to Make Your Cake Rise, you would instead title it something like How to Make Your Cake Rise Perfectly, right? And so you're avoiding using any technical terms that a beginner probably won't understand. And as a bonus, using numbers in your titles is a very, very good way to create curiosity. Let's talk about thumbnails now. What makes a good thumbnail? A good thumbnail starts a story that the viewer wants to know the ending to. What exactly does this mean? Well, if we were to put 2 different thumbnails on the screen, which one of these would you be more likely to click on? Well, chances are, if you're being honest, you said this one. Why? Well, because this thumbnail is creating curiosity, and combined with the title, this thumbnail is telling a story, and it makes sense given the view difference between these 2 videos. You see, people really only click on thumbnails that make them emotionally triggered, right? Perhaps it's making them angry, or fearful, scared, or it's making them feel hopeful, right? Whatever the case, as a general rule of thumb, if your thumbnail is not emotionally triggering somebody, chances are it's not a good thumbnail. Now, on a much more practical level, here are some really important tips for creating good thumbnails. First, you want to make sure that you're always using high quality images. This is probably pretty obvious. Using contrasting colors is also extremely helpful because it helps your thumbnail to stand out from the sea of thumbnails that exist on YouTube. And here's an example of that. These are both the same exact thumbnail, but watch what happens when we give this one some contrasting colors. Almost immediately, this thumbnail stands out, and it's because of the contrasting colors. Also, if you're using text, you want to make sure that your text is easy to read. The text should be legible, which means you should probably avoid using any type of fancy script font, but it should also be large enough that you can see the text from a distance. This also means you should probably limit how much text you're putting on your thumbnail. Anything more than probably about 4 words is too much. A good way to test this is to zoom out in whatever software you're using to make your thumbnails, and after zooming out really far, ask yourself, can I still read the text? If the answer is yes, then your text is good. It also helps to have a strong focal point in your thumbnail, and let's use these 2 thumbnails as an example. In this thumbnail here, there is no obvious focal point, right? Like the welcome to Florida sign, the road trip text, and the actual paramotor itself are all competing for focus. On the other hand, this thumbnail here has a very obvious focal point. Okay, and so that's the first thing that YouTube cares about the most, people clicking on your video. And then after they click on your video, getting them to actually watch your video. And this is the second thing that YouTube cares about the most. If you can get people to watch your video for even a decent amount of time, your video will do extremely well on the platform. And so let's go ahead and tackle this subject, okay? How exactly can you make content that people want to watch? Well, on a very basic level, it comes down to 3 different different elements: audience, hook, and production. And once again, we talk about all of these things in great detail in the Pro YouTuber course, which again is linked down below in the description. But let's briefly go over the basics of what all of this means and how they contribute to your videos actually being watched. And we'll start first with the audience. It is going to be absolutely critical that you know who your audience is. And another way of saying this is, what is your niche? Now, at the very beginning of your journey, like when you first start your channel and you start making videos, knowing what your niche is not super important. But eventually, you are going to want to define who you're actually making content for. Listen, all kidding aside, okay? There are people out there who really believe that in order to grow on YouTube, you don't have to have a niche. They'll tell you things like, you don't have to niche down to grow on YouTube. And the problem with this is that it is grossly incorrect. YouTube themselves has specifically said that having a niche will likely help you to get more views, which leads to your channel actually growing. And channels that don't have a niche and they just post all different types of content, literally 99% of the time, those channels never grow. Now, here lies the most difficult part of starting a YouTube channel for most people. What do I actually start a YouTube channel about? What is my niche? So in a perfect ideal world, your niche should be something that you enjoy talking about, like you could make videos about this thing, but it should also be something that has an accessible audience, meaning that your channel will actually be able to grow to a decent or large size if you make content about this subject. And lastly, it should be something that you can make money from. And your niche will basically be at the center of all three of these things. Now, this is a lot easier said than done, okay? And so I'm gonna really quickly walk you through how you can potentially figure out what your niche is. What I want you to do is just take a step back and ask yourself one simple question. What do I enjoy talking about? In other words, what could I talk about for hours completely free? If you could talk about video games for hours, so be it. If you could talk about the latest celebrity gossip for hours, great. The point here is just to try and identify what piques your interest, right? And it could be multiple things. I want you to write as many things down on a piece of paper, because then we can take all of these things and we can start exploring what we can turn into a real YouTube niche. And if you can't answer that question by yourself, like what do I enjoy talking about, perhaps try asking a friend or like a family member or somebody who just knows you relatively well. And I want you to ask them, hey, what things do I talk about all the time when we're together? But above all, just remember that finding your niche can take time. And so don't be discouraged if you can't figure out what it is right away. Now, after the audience, your video hooks are the next most important thing to focus on if you want people to watch your videos. So what exactly are video hooks? The video hook is the very beginning of the video. Typically, it's the first 3 to 10 seconds of the video where you say something that captures the viewer's interest. And the reason the video hook is so important, and this is something that I don't hear basically anybody talking about on YouTube, but the reason the video hook is so important is because if you can't hook somebody to watch the first 5 to 10 seconds of your video, then they will never watch the rest of your video. You have to hook them within the first few seconds to then get them to watch the rest of the video. Because even according to YouTube, the first 30 seconds of your video are absolutely crucial, okay? And so if you can get a large percentage of people to watch the first 30 seconds of your video, then you're doing something that literally 90% of YouTubers can't do, and more than likely your video